name's Nancy Turner, and I'm on the board of the Ecoforestry Institute Society. I'm a botanist, an ethnobotanist, because I'm very interested in people and plants and people's knowledge and use and philosophies and language that relate to plants. So that's what an ethnobotanist does. And I've had the privilege of learning from many Indigenous peoples around British Columbia over many years. Our aims are to just keep this beautiful forest going and following the mantra or the thinking of the late Merv Wilkinson. And I personally used to bring my classes from the University of Victoria here in the School of Environmental Studies, and we would meet just like this, a nice class. He would stand and just talk about his forest and his philosophy, and I can't possibly replace Merv and his teachings, but I'll just give you a little bit of background. I want to acknowledge that where we are now, this beautiful forest land, we are on the traditional territory of the Tsumenis First Nation and spreading out to the Nanaimo Nation. And the first peoples around here are all speakers of Salish, the Salish language, Ho'okame'nam, different dialects of that. And there was a lot of intermarriage amongst the different communities on the southeast coast. So many people that I know have relations who live here in this territory. And as I said, I've been privileged to learn from many knowledgeable and wise teachers. And so what I'm sharing with you, in many cases, I'll try and tell you who it was who taught me, but often it's a common knowledge, that things that people use very widely. I'll start off by talking about this beautiful red huckleberry called squatchus in the Sanchafan language. What to me it epitomizes the recycling of life, because you see here where it's growing. It's growing on a stump, and it's living from the nutrients provided by a previous generation of plants. This, to me, this bush represents Merv Wilkinson's philosophy, which was how everything is connected to each other and how different forms of life support each other. And so his idea was that everything is growing, everything is productive, all the green plants around here are living things, and you can harvest some, but if you take all, you're going to throw everything out of kilter. You're going to throw everything out of balance. And so he started in the 1930s. He studied forestry, and he didn't quite like the conventional clear cut that was being practiced. He thought he could do it a different way. And so he bought this property, and he looked at the forest here, and he thought, you know, I can take out a few trees here and a few trees there and leave lots of them growing, and leave the best, the finest trees, the ones that are growing the best and the happiest, leave those alone to reproduce themselves, to provide the seeds, and the forest will take care of itself. So Douglas fir is the predominant tree of Wildwood, and it's also the predominant tree of the southeastern part of Vancouver Island. It's this whole ecosystem, this whole vegetation is called the coastal Douglas fir biogeoclimatic zone, and Douglas fir is the key. In drier areas, however, you get different you get the Garry Oaks, which you see around the Cowichan Valley and places and around Victoria. As well as Douglas fir, we have a few other species that come into this forest of the evergreens. There's one over there with the sunlight on its branches, and you see how flat it is. So that is the grand fir, Abies grandis or Abies grandis, and we have three species. They call it true fir. Flat, and its leaves, its needles have a little tiny notch in the tip, and if you crush them up, hey, Braxton,
I already know this.
you already know that, don't you? Smell it.
With the grapefruit pie?
Yeah, it smells like grapefruit.
I call it the grape.
Try it, Donna. Yeah, and so you can make a really nice tea. And cedar, some of you probably know, is one of the most important of all the plants for First Nations. And the inner bark is important for making mats and baskets. And I just happen to have a cedar bark basket, which I'll pass around. And this is a cedar bark berry picking basket that was made by a Haida artist from Vancouver. Help yourself, you can rub it on your skin, but it's a little sticky. Just pass it around. It's a salve that's used for cuts. Strip along, hanging down from a stem. And when those flowers are pollinated and when they ripen into berries, the berries are produced in the same format. And so you can pick the whole cluster out at once. And you can take them home like that, and you can pick lots by doing that, and then you clean them off the stem, and then you can eat them fresh and they're delicious. But also, one of the reasons why they're probably the most important fruit for the First Nations on the island is that they dry really well into sort of a berry cake. So you can take from being burned by the rocks or get ashes on them. And then some people will put sword fern on top of that. Some people will put thimbleberry leaves, rose. There are lots of different other plants that they use. Then you put your food in. It could be camas bulbs, it could be clams. And you build up your food in layers, cover it up with another armload of salal. Yerba buena. Anyone can tell me what that means in Spanish?
Good grass.
Good herb. Good grass.
Spanish,
Yeah. So this, you can tell it's in the mint family because it has a square stem and opposite leaves. And if you smell it, what does it smell like?
I don't really know. It's hard to describe.
Camphor. Hi.
It's aromatic. By a lot of the First Peoples, especially children. And it has an edible leaf that's kind of lemon flavored. Yeah.
Sorry, Nancy, what's that sorrel?
That is, I forgot to say, it's called sheep sorrel. It produces a compound called coumarin, which is similar to vanilla. And that's what gives it the sweet smell. And I was just clipping some the other day and I could smell this beautiful scent. But if you pull up the roots, they really stink. I don't know why. It's like the yin and the yang. Have you heard of chrysanthemums, a flower that grows in pots? And
We make tea out of it.
so it's a kind of chrysanthemum. You can also eat the young leaves, the petals. You can also eat these young leaves. And They're really nice in salads. They're kind of sweet tasting.
Surface of the ground, except in streams. It gets soaked into the near surface groundwater system. And sword fern, I was just saying that sword fern, which is there, is a really important plant for doing that because it's funnel shaped. It's like a great big funnel. So it takes the winter rain and it funnels it into the near surface groundwater system. When, of course, you clear cut harvest an area, you lose the sword fern. And you lose that hydrologic connection, and we end up with floods. I mean, I was up in Grand Forks earlier this week, and flooding situation there.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story about the sword fern. Dave told you how important it is as a water collector, because if you look at the way it grows like a vase, it traps the water, and the water funnels down into the rootstock and goes into the soil. So the sword fern has really important ecological function in the forest. The sword fern also has a lot of cultural importance and is used a lot in the winter ceremonials and is considered sacred in some ways. It's used in the first salmon ceremony. People will lay the salmon on the sword fern fronds. You know what bull kelp is, right? That long seaweed with a bulb on the top and fronds coming out from the bulb. Well, the line itself can be cured, and that's what they did. They rubbed it with oil, usually dogfish or ratfish oil. They'd dry it out, they'd soak it. Also were whale hunters, and when the whale was harpooned and killed, someone had to dive down and tie the whale's mouth shut. If it was left open, it would fill with water and the whale would sink. So that was another really important task. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the western red cedar, because it's such an important tree, as well as being a beautiful tree. Sorry. You see how springy the branches are. The wood contains compounds that are preservatives in a sense. They ward off fungus and insects. And for that reason, wood of western red cedar makes good storage boxes, and it's also used today, as you know, for telephone poles and fence posts and things that that are rot resistant, for canoes, for house planks, for house posts and totem poles and so forth. But I was taught by a man from Mount Currie, Alec Peters, from the Lilwat Nation. I went out with him and his wife Nellie, who was a basket weaver, and she made those beautiful coiled baskets from cedar roots. And we went out and she showed me how you harvest the roots. You just take a couple from each tree. Along the Birkenhead River this was, and it was sandy soil, and you just pull up a few roots from one tree and then you move on. And he showed me how the branch is also, it's very flexible, and you can actually make a rope from it that's so strong. You can use a cedar withe, they call it, a cedar branch rope. They use it as a canoe anchor and for all kinds of other purposes, for tying the boards onto houses and everything. And he showed me how you do it. You start, and I'm not going to actually do it because I don't want to hurt this tree, but it's almost like, it looked to me like he was winding up one of those old-fashioned Ford cars, you know, with the crank in the front. It was like that, the way he wound it. He wound it, started here, leaving a space like that, untwisted, and he twisted the whole length of the branch until all the vertical fibers were in place, but the lateral ones had broken, and it kept its twist. I still have the rope that he made for me, and that was in 1984. And he said you can use that to tie fence posts, for example, or tie railings onto fence posts. And he said his dad made a fence like that with cedar railings and tied with cedar branches. At the same time, his dad's neighbor made a barbed wire fence. And he said the barbed wire fence was long gone. It had just rotted away, and the cedar fence was still standing, the one that he'd made tied with the cedar boughs. So I've talked about the wood, the roots, the branches, and then the inner bark I mentioned before. And it's all done with great, great care. The harvesting of a tree like this is seen as a living, sentient being. It's our relative. It's got its own needs and its own relationships and its own life, and that life is respected. And so people who are traditional harvesters of cedar, anywhere you go on the coast, they're always really, really careful when they go out to harvest cedar. And as I said, if you're getting roots, you just get a couple. If you're getting branches, you just get a couple. If you need to, you can even take planks from a standing tree without killing the tree. And you can also take the bark, but you would take one strip of the bark. You wouldn't girdle the tree and kill it. You would always ask permission from the tree and thank the tree. You have gratitude for the gift that it gives you. And all up and down the coast and all into the interior, you can find trees that are called culturally modified trees, CMTs, they say for short. And these are trees that have had, at some time or other, they've had parts of them harvested from them, and that's shown by what the tree looks like. Sometimes the tree will heal itself over and you don't even know that it is culturally modified unless you cut it down. The name for it is Dal Hill. That means red, or Dal Hill Skate. And you don't want it to rain when you're picking seaweed because it won't dry properly. It's like an apple leaf, but it usually has one or two coarse teeth on the edge of the leaf like that. And it has small fruit, small apples that are about that big in clusters, and it is still a very, very important food for a lot of my friends along the coast. Its closest relative is the Asian crabapple. And genetic testing showed that they've been separated for about 10,000 years only. So it's possible, it's only possible, but it's possible that people brought the crabapple over with them during the Pleistocene as they were coming into the New World from Asia. Just a thought. The other plant I want to tell you about is salmonberry. The salmonberry looks like a raspberry. It has a three-parted leaf. Salmonberries have a different colors, genetically different, determines what color it berries. And every once in a while, you'll get a white berried form of salmonberry, or even I've seen a white-red huckleberry with pure white berries. And some of the other plants also will have white fruit. But this salmonberry usually has golden fruit, golden yellow fruit, or ruby red fruit or dark fruit. So in the Sanchathan, the Saanich language, there is a song, the song of the Swainson's thrush, and we heard Swainson's thrush singing today. It has that beautiful fluty rising, sort of like that.
That's pretty good.
The song is translated. It's singing to the salmonberries, and it's saying, "Come on, oh you little light ones, come on, oh you little yellow ones, come on, oh you little red ones, come on, oh you little dark ones, ripen, 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 ripen." That's what the Swainson's thrush is singing. So I shouldn't do this because we don't have much time, but I'll tell you a quick story. So Swainson's thrush invited Raven to his house for dinner. And Raven, who never turned down a free dinner, came along. Swainson's thrush gave the basket to his children and sent them out and started to sing. And after just a little while, the kids came back and their baskets were full of berries of all those different colors. And they sat down, had a wonderful feast. And Raven thought, oh, that looks easy. You come to my house tomorrow night for dinner. So Swainson's thrush came along. Raven handed baskets to his kids and he sent them off. And he started to sing. He sang and he sang and he sang and he sang. After about an hour, the kids came back. No berries, baskets empty. Swainson's thrush had to go home without any food. And Raven was embarrassed. But the lesson is, you don't capitalize on other people's talents. They can be about as thick as your finger. You peel them off and get the spines off them, and then you can just eat them like that. Who was it who wanted to find some pitch? Okay. It's here. It's very sticky pitch. I've seen trees up at the coast with a cut made about there, and the pitch is just coming out, just running out. And when it gets, people will collect it using a shell or something and make salve from it. After a while, if it heals up, they'll recut it. And some of those trees have been pitch trees for generations. People remember them going way back. Yes. It's very sticky.
So this smells different to the other one we tried.
Yeah, each one has its own particular combination of compounds, but they're all used medicinally like that. Legs, and it was really shiny and black, and everyone used to say, how did you get such beautiful hair? And she didn't tell anybody, but her grandmother would make a hair lotion from this plant. And it, like that sweet vernal grass up in the meadow, it has coumarin in it, especially when it's bruised or when it's dying. And if you crush it and then put it in water, fill a jar with water, and let it sit for about 3 days. She said it turns the water kind of green and a little slimy. That's the hair rinse that her grandmother used on her hair. So she was willing to share that with us, and I'm sharing it with you with that understanding. But we do have some that grows under the canopy where it's shady and moist. And usually the undersides of the leaves are white, and you could actually nibble these little bits like the salal leaves. If you're lost in the woods and you don't have food, you can nibble the little tips of these branches of hemlock. Hemlock has a lot of other uses too, including making a dye from the bark. Get it in your tongue and throat, and it can it burns like scalding coffee, I was told by someone. Okay. Yeah. But however, you can see that it has kind of a shiny surface to it. And so people, and this is a small one. I've seen ones that are taller than me and this wide growing out on the west coast. And so this is an ideal surface for food, and people would take the stem off and just that and this is a very small one, right? You can make a much bigger one. Fold it up like that. Bend the edges up to the stem like that, and you have a cup. that even this little leaf, you could hold half a cup of water in that. And for a bigger leaf, you can make one that holds 2 cups. And I've often thought you could probably boil a cup of tea in there if you had to, using red hot rocks, but I've never actually tried that.
You might have a funny taste.